This is Reasonable Doubt with your hosts, Mark Garrigus and Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get it on the choice, but they got a mandate. Get it on. Welcome to the best hour or so in the universe. It is Reasonable Doubt. I'm Adam Carolla. It's Mark Garrigus over there. Mark, I know there's some stuff you want to get into. There's stuff I want to get into.
Yeah, there's stuff you want to get into, but the first thing we should get into is I loved this story, and I thought of you as soon as I saw it. Gary, do you have the story?
Yeah, absolutely. The hero out of New Hampshire.
Yeah. Do you know this story? Have you seen this? Okay. Gary, I'm going to let you do the honors.
Sure, my pleasure. A New Hampshire woman is accused of pretending to be a prosecutor and submitting paperwork dropping stalking and drug charges against herself.
Wait, well, it is Halloween. I mean, as we tape this, did she do it today? Because you can pretend to be a fireman, you can pretend to be a policeman.
Well, I don't know if you guys remembered, but many, many episodes ago, we talked about the idea of identifying yourself, self-identification. And we had explored the idea of, I think I'd said in a burglary, if I just told the prosecutor that my client identifies as the homeowner, that would be a defense to the burglary charge.
Right.
And then Adam was going to identify as the warden if he was ever sent to prison.
Yeah, right.
Oh, right.
Right.
Yeah, that's my thing. I wasn't going to identify as a woman and go to the women's prison. I was going to stay a man. Newsom. Where I was going to announce I was the warden, and then I would free myself.
Exactly.
Right.
Say, yeah, you get to go. Or you could identify as the governor and pardon yourself.
No. Hold on. I would be the warden of the woman's prison and never leave. There's a lot of 80s movies I've watched that had a theme to them where they had to do his bidding. You know what I mean?
For the warden. I remember. That was I forget there was an actress who made quite a career out of it.
Oh, okay. There was Sybil Danning.
Right. There you go. Bingo.
How'd you know? Bongo.
Bingo.
Well, how'd I know?
Bang, bongo.
That's all I had.
Sybil Danning.
It's not like I had a Corvette and a girlfriend. I had Sybil Danning in a prison movie. That's what I had.
And what was your favorite? Who was your favorite female singer in the 80s?
Oh, like who?
I mean, were you kind of Chrissy Hynde pretenders?
Who'd I have the hots? Who'd I have the hots for?
Waitresses.
I loved the music of the Pretenders.
Yeah.
I've always been a huge Pretenders fan. I loved their first two albums. I thought they were just groundbreaking. They still sound great today.
One of the highlights of my life, top 10 highlights of my life, was when I'm promoting concerts at Perkins Palace, and the Pretenders did 4 nights at the old Santa Monica Civic. We were a surprise 5th night. I had worked out a deal with the promoter, and so the Pretenders show up there. It's a surprise concert. We sell out in no time. It was like 5 minutes. And then who walks in? 81, 82. Who walks in but Bruce Springsteen and says, I want to go on stage with her. And he goes on stage with Chrissy, and they sing Jackie Wilson's Higher and Higher. I said, I could just die and go to heaven right now. This is about as good as it gets.
Yeah, I love the Pretenders. And you know, I like Chrissy. I'm trying to think of like who I had the hots, the hots for.
Patty and the Waitresses. That was always mine.
Yeah. And then there's Patty Smythe from Scandal, who was back then as well.
Joan Jett?
No.
No Joan Jett for you, huh?
No, hate her music.
Really?
Hate her music.
Wow.
Can't stand I Love Rock and Roll. And all she did, well, first off, does she write songs? Like, I don't know what song she has. She's a shitty songwriter. I Love Rock and Roll and whatever her other Crimson and Clover.
Crimson and Clover, right?
They're both covers. She's a 0.
Wow.
I have no interest in that.
That's like fighting words. Joan Jett is 0.
Not at all.
Yeah.
She's doing an impersonator. She's an impersonation of a rock star.
Okay.
Chrissy Hynde from the Pretenders. It's 1,000 Joan Jett.
Total rock star. In fact, she had quite the attitude back then too. She was one of those. she was one of those ones who took rock and roll seriously, spiritually, in every which way.
The only I never bug a celebrity, but when I was at the Goodwood Festival about 3 years ago, they had the party, the gala that night at like Lord Goodwood's Manor, and they always get a list, entertainment, and Chrissy Hynde was so.
Did you go up to her?
So yeah, she does the show, she does her set, everyone's eating and wearing tuxedos and all that kind of stuff. And I just thought to myself, I never do this. I never do that. I've interviewed her once. We got on pretty good. I remember there was a thing about her that I liked a lot, which is I said, she's obviously a pretty progressive person, I think. I said, Rush Limbaugh uses the beginning of Going Back to Ohio or whatever, her song. That's his intro song. He's used it for 25 years. And I'm like, you probably don't agree with Rush's politics, right? He's like, no, not at all. I was like, but he uses your song. Do you have any thoughts about that? And she's like, no, I don't care. And I thought that's the equivalent to, the guys is like, is it Steve? Is it Steven? Yeah, I don't care.
Yeah.
I love that person. I love whatever. Next. Like, I don't know why it drives me nuts when people get so up in their own shit. But anyway, we're at this party. She plays her set, and I'm like, I'm just going to go up to her. And she plays her set. She walks off stage. It's not a real venue. It's like a stage, and there's catering, but it goes right behind this sort of flap, this curtain thing, to where like the catering stuff is. And I'm like, I'm just going to go in there and introduce myself. And I just flap the curtain, and I step into the space. And she's literally closing the door of a Range Rover that was backed up to the stage edge. I mean, like literally walked off stage and went straight into a car. And the car was running and the door was open.
Wow.
And it was facing her house.
That's what I said.
What I mean? Like,
she
just
takes
gone.
She takes it. The impression I got was she takes it real serious.
Well, anyway.
Anyway, Gary, we interrupted the story.
No, by all means. And Ace, just to button it up a little bit, Joan Jett has written solo 7 songs and has co-writing credits on 24.
Yeah, look at that.
I'm the wrong demographic to recognize any of them.
7 songs she wrote.
Wait a second. I've got her.
She's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Anyways, back to this this hero out of New Hampshire. She did do it around Halloween, but I'm going to say Halloween didn't play into it because she went so far as to impersonate a prosecutor using the court's secure digital filing service.
Wow.
So level of sophistication here. I wouldn't suspect that as someone being charged with drug charges and stalking, but yeah.
Okay, I just looked on my playlist. I Hate Myself for Loving You, which I love that song.
Did
she write it?
Did she write it?
I Hate Myself for Loving You.
She co-wrote that with Desmond Child.
Okay, then
right.
I push back.
That's
a song
I kind of like
push a little way. Yeah, you gotta. How could you not like the song "I Hate Myself for Loving You"? How many times over the years have you said that?
All right, I hate myself for hating Joan Jett.
Exactly. Very
That's
good.
what I wanted to
That'll
say.
be your song. Maybe get Dawson to.
Not saying she doesn't have ability. I just feel you know what it is.
What? There's something there. What is it?
Okay,
I've identified that.
Whenever it's the same reason.
You the wrong
same
way.
reason I hate the Sex Pistols, and it's the same reason I hate the Beastie Boys. When I see attitude trumping ability, I get suspicious.
Okay.
I love Ben Folds. He sits down in a T-shirt and just rocks that piano, and you go, I couldn't do that. Beastie Boys look like they constructed a whole world so they can be rock stars, but they don't really have any ability.
But aren't Beastie Boys the ones who talk about? They're also on my playlist, I think. Aren't they the ones who say, "Mom threw away my porno mag"?
Yes.
And blah, blah, blah. They got some. They got some.
I think
game.
you could write. Huh? You could have been a Beastie Boy.
I could have been a Beastie Boy. More attitude than talent.
When you were 19. Yeah. All right.
Okay, so she went into the portal. She pretended she was the prosecutor to dismiss her case.
Yeah, and ultimately what got her caught was a forensic technician who was charged with going over a piece of evidence for a case. Went into the system when they were preparing to run the diagnostic and realized the case had been dropped. So they reached out to the prosecutor and said, "Should I waste my time doing this?" And the prosecutor said, "I never dropped that." And thus she ended up getting caught and is facing felony charges.
Wow. If that were California, I'd almost volunteer to defend her pro bono, just strictly on creativity.
What?
I mean, she says, "I thought I was the prosecutor." I wonder if she signed anything under penalty of perjury in order to do it.
She also is accused of filing an order on behalf of a relative to halt guardianship proceedings against her involving her child.
You wonder why this doesn't happen more often.
Also, this is one of those things where, like, when you'd watch Batman, the TV series back in the day, at some point there'd be some beautiful mad scientist villain. Some.
Are we talking the Adam West Batman?
Yeah. There'd be like it wasn't Catwoman. God, who was his evil? He had a hot evil nemesis. But either way, at some point at the end, before they cuffed her, he'd do this thing where like it's a shame you didn't use that mind for good.
Well, do you know
mean?
who pioneered that? Do you remember what was his name? Broderick something, and it was called Highway Patrol.
Yes.
Okay, and he was kind of this big guy, and you could never see. They never could film him getting in and out of the car. What was his name, Gary? It was Broderick, something Broderick, and the TV series was Highway Patrol.
Dun, dun,
Broderick
dun,
Crawford.
Dun,
Broderick
dun,
Crawford,
dun,
and he
dun,
always
dun.
had all these great expressions. It was like. They'd say, Mr. Crawford, you wouldn't have caught me if I didn't take the wrong road. And he'd go, son, you took the wrong road a long time ago.
Right.
Bam! And then,
Bum, 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 dun, da, 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 da. It sounds a little like Star Wars.
Right.
Wasn't
maybe there's a lawsuit there, a la Led Zeppelin and Stairway to Heaven.
Find or Huey Lewis and
Huey Lewis, remember that?
Huey Lewis made a pretty penny off of suing Ivan Reitman and Ray Parker for Ghostbusters.
Right.
That was see, here's the reason that was an easy one. Anyone could have gotten that money. Because Ray Parker. No, because Ivan Reitman, because he told me this in his office in up Salinas or wherever the hell his office was. But anyway, because he went to Huey Lewis first,
right.
And he said, I want you to do a song for Ghostbusters. And Huey said, no thanks. So then when Ray Parker did it, it just sounded like Huey Lewis. And it was an easy lawsuit because he came to him first,
right.
And he turned him down. So Huey's antenna was already up.
His antenna's up. Plus, he's already thinking, okay, this guy really wanted to screw me. And the way he did it is hired a guy and said, okay, we wanted Huey. Give me a Huey sound.
Right. Yeah. And that's where they
exactly.
saw. They did I Want a New Drug was the song that they ripped off. But I got to tell you, the Bar-Kays Soul Finger, to me, which predates both those songs by 20 years, has a lot more Ghostbusters in it than I Want a New Drug.
That's interesting. I can hear it in my head. I can hear it. I don't disagree with that.
You can hear it. Well, we'll play a second of it.
Okay. So now, Gary, I know what Adam wants to talk about, so I'm going to lead into that in a way. We're going to talk about, there's been a lot of activity.
So think about Ghostbusters. Who are you going to call?
Was there a lawsuit out of this?
The Bar-Kays never did it. This sounds more like Ghostbusters than I Want a New Drug, but I Want a New Drug sued. The white man lawyered up. The Bar-Kays, the brothers got ripped off again.
Well, that's the history of music.
Right.
Look,
all right.
Elvis Presley.
Real fast, just to button it up, Ace, from Batman, would you be thinking of the Black Widow?
Probably.
Played by Tallulah Bankhead?
Do we have a
Sounds
picture
good.
of Tallulah? Because then I would know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Got it. You'll drop it in. Okay. So a lot of activity at the U.S. Supreme Court. And very interesting in the way it's all playing out. Obviously, we've got a new justice, not a new drug. And the new justice has not weighed in, as far as I can tell, on any of these cases so far. But basically, it's been Pennsylvania and two of the other swing states with the idea the Republican Party and the Democratic Party have been kind of battling and filing lawsuits, whether or not you can mail in your ballot and have it postmarked prior to November 3rd, which is Election Day, and whether those should be counted. And so the kind of terrain, so to speak, are in some cases they're ruling, like Pennsylvania, which was 4-4, which may not be 4-4. They're saying that the Pennsylvania state court, or the interpretation is that was interpretation of state law, But the other one that they reversed, which I believe was Wisconsin,
Yeah,
is that
both,
right, Gary?
Right. Both Pennsylvania and North Carolina were based off of state court rulings as opposed to a federal court.
And Wisconsin was a federal court judge. So the swing vote so far has been Chief Justice Roberts, who's basically said, if it's going to be the state legislatures and the state courts interpreting, I'm not getting in the middle of that. But a federal court judge getting in the middle of that, that's overstepping their bounds.
What state did they decide? Maybe it was Minnesota or something, where they decided you could send it in after the election, which seemed a little hanky to me.
You're saying postmarked after the election?
Yes.
Let me check.
I think it's clear at this point. The one thing that I think you can glean from because there's 4 cases. We could spend 4 hours on the nuances of these cases, but the Kavanaugh opinion and the Chief Justice 4-4. So far, the thing that I glean is, if you've got a state rule that's been in effect for a while that says postmarked before the 3rd, they're probably going to count that. But most of the secretaries of state are going to segregate the ones that come in after the 3rd in case there's a Supreme Court ruling that says you can't count ballots that came in after the 3rd.
One of those is Pennsylvania, and Ace, there's probably multiple, but Pennsylvania falls under the scenario that you're describing, which is mail-in ballots that arrive by November 6th and are either A, postmarked by Election Day, or B, not postmarked at all, will be counted.
Right.
Yeah, so my head on it is, if it's postmarked by Election Day, then it should be counted. If it's postmarked after Election Day, it shouldn't be counted. And if it's not postmarked at all, it probably shouldn't be counted either.
Postmarked is the one that bothers me because to some degree, unless you go to the post office, and by the way, you read these opinions and you hear these things, and it's obvious to me that most of these justices have never paid property taxes before, because for you and I, when we pay property taxes, I've been burned so many times by just throwing the check in the mail, because if you throw the check in the mail on April 10th or whenever, December 10th, you don't get penalized. But I've got nailed a couple of times when they've said, no, it was postmarked after. I said, no, you're wrong, blah, blah, blah. So now I actually have my team go to the post office. They get a return receipt requested so that you can show that it was postmarked on the day. And if you're going to penalize somebody actual money, take their property away, then I think that that's a fair demarcation. But not having a postmark, I have a problem with if you just drop it in, because you can't control the post office.
I couldn't agree more, and I too will send my tax returns that way, so that I certified mail, so I have a receipt that I can show. But wouldn't the argument be that that's disenfranchising people who can't afford that 94 cents or whatever it is?
Yeah, and I understand that argument, but they disenfranchise me, who I have the money already. I've got ones. I'm fighting with Orange County right now on a property where I've got the certified receipt, and they're saying, no, sorry, we didn't get it on time.
Well, all right, so we can agree no postmark is no bueno. What's your take on late post?
I think that there's a strong argument that if it's postmarked after the 3rd, sorry, Charlie, you just can't. You have to have a set of rules.
My argument, if I'm arguing for throw it out, is we have Election Day and you have the option to go vote. If you're going to send it in, it's really a version of Election Day, but you don't have to leave your house.
Correct.
So,
and I understand.
But you can't go in on the 4th and vote. So whatever you can't do in person, you can't do by mail. And whatever you can do in person, you can do by mail. That's why we have mail in.
Right. And one of the reasons that I've got a real problem with Kavanaugh's opinion is that, and I read
what is Kavanaugh's
opinion is that you can't have basically federal judges jumping in at the last minute, because you've got to have, he takes the there's a article that was written by a guy, I think at NYU, and he takes that article and he inverts it. He basically quotes it for something it doesn't stand for, but says that the public will be very basically there's going to be alarm, there's going to be the distrust if you start taking or changing the rules closer as you get to the election. Well, part of the problem is you've got a pandemic, number one. And there is, Gary, do you have the footnote? Because the footnote in the dissent, if I were Kagan, I think it was Kagan who wrote it, the dissent, I would have put that as my prologue. She says, well, you can't flip the election and get the public.
I've got the quote here.
What is it? Read it.
Quote, "The facts, as found by the district courts, are clear. Tens of thousands of Wisconsinites, through no fault of their own, may receive their ballots too late to return them by Election Day. Without the district court's order, they must opt between braving the polls with all the risks that entails and losing their right to vote."
What the fuck is going on? Everyone goes to. I've been on 5 Southwest flights. I go to fucking Trader Joe's every other day. Who's braving a poll?
And this is what I don't understand. Everybody keeps missing the point. First of all, you don't have to necessarily brave the polls. You do mail.
Well, no. Also, if you can't do mail, a lot of people are now saying that as of today, as we record, that it's too late to mail it in with any sense of confidence.
Right. I agree with that. You wouldn't.
Sure.
I'm waiting on a check that an insurance company said they mailed a week and a half ago.
Well, I know it's different everywhere, but I've checked where I live. Within 3 miles of my home, there are 4 drop-off locations.
Correct.
Now, I know that in many other places, it's not as ample a chance, that's not braving the polls. That's walking up to a mailbox.
What the fuck year is it? This is like voter ID, like calling ID for vote suppression. Who the fuck doesn't have an ID in 2021? And if you gave a shit, you'd work on getting them one.
But this is what the Kavanaugh thing, which drives me crazy, is he says, well, this would flip the result if you allowed the late breaking. I would agree with that if it was your point. If they were November 4th, 5th, and 6th votes after the election, yes, that flips the election because they didn't comply. But if they're votes before the 3rd, postmarked before the 3rd, then you're the one who's flipping the vote. You're saying that somebody who voted and who mailed it before the 3rd, which is what they were supposed to do, and their Secretary of State or election said it, that is logical.
Right. I agree.
Yeah,
we're on the same page.
What, if you want to take the conspiracy theory.
I'm sorry, but I think what he's saying is it's going to upset the election in the sense that we won't have a result that
on election night.
Right.
And you know what?
That's the problem.
Who gives a shit? You don't have an election. The whole reason, it's such a non-issue. The whole reason that you have for 200 years a date in January to certify the election is because you don't get it on election night. That's we are spoiled in that we think that we've got to have this instantaneous gratification. There are all kinds of rules for when you can do it. We're sitting in L.A. County. By the way, we didn't know if there was going to be a runoff for the district attorney until a month after the election. We're voting again now in a runoff between Gascon and Jackie Lacey, but we didn't know the results, whether there was going to be a runoff for weeks.
Is Gaston bad?
Gaston is self-styled the progressive prosecutor. Jackie is a black female whose kind of mentor was Steve Cooley. And even though I believe she's a Democrat, she's the one whose husband had the gun on his porch with Black Lives Matter. And then
I like her.
The DA. Yes,
so do I. Mark, aren't you bearing the lead on Gaston? Wasn't he last in San Francisco for like a stretch?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's your
and
number one.
Before that was, I believe, LAPD. LAPD left to go to San Francisco, became DA there, and then came back here to live with his mother, or take care of his mother who's ill.
I can't take any more of these fucking ultra progressive assholes.
I thought it was because he came back to take care of his mother.
No, well, I don't like that either. But strike two.
I was going to say that for Adam, that was the compelling reason to.
There's got to, it's a fine line, but we got to have some fucking law and order. I drove past Elysian Park yesterday on my.
Did you go through Dodger Stadium off the?
Yeah, I went off.
Like you go the two.
Yeah,
and then off?
I went off that, and I went by the park. Which one is it? It's the one with the one that has the lake and the pedal.
That's
boats.
MacArthur Park. Heroin. Wait, you scoring a little black tar heroin?
I drove right past it. It was literally a campsite. I mean, there were tents everywhere.
There is more heroin dealt in that park than any other place in America. And by the way, did you see the guy I feel the worst for is the Langer family.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
The Langer family is on the corner of that. So they look into that park.
The deli?
The deli. The best deli. I think it's better than any New York deli. This guy shuts down now at 4 o'clock and he's got curbside service.
Oh,
and
my God.
He's on fumes because, by the way, Taylor's, which is in La Cañada, they used to be right around the corner.
Right.
And then the people kept stabbing their waitresses, so they had to close up.
The park, now it used to be, 2 years ago I drove past it, and where the sign said MacArthur Park, some guy was using it as a clothesline to dry his underpants because he probably washed them in the lake, It was so MacArthur Park used to be nice and empty, and it had you could rent these swan boats
paddle
and pedal them around. It is now tents from the beginning, from the tip all the way down. Just it's literally an encampment.
If you look on the catty corner from Langer's, if you're sitting in Langer's on the corner of Langer's, and you look across the park, you see this giant mirrored building. Mm-hmm. The giant mirrored building was the L.A. Superior Court, what they called Central Civil West. Mm-hmm. That's where they did they shipped out all the cases there. Well, they couldn't get out of that place fast enough once they saw that neighborhood, and they're back in the old federal courthouse now.
The goddamn place, it was nuts, and I thought. Someone has we're
there
looking
you
at.
Go. There you
Somebody
go.
has.
So you're looking at the park, and then you can see the building there, right, Gary? A little to the left. Yeah.
Somebody has a business where they rent out those pedal boats to families and kids. How is that business going to work?
But I just feel so bad for the Langer family. They've been there for 3 generations. The best rye bread, the best pastrami.
Now my mouth's watering. All right, what else?
Wait. I want to go
real fast
from
guys.
there. Yes.
Sorry, let me clean this up. We were wrong on who we thought it was. It's the character's name was Siren in Batman, and it was played by Joan Collins. And I'll put up a picture for you now.
Who later went on to Dynasty fame.
That's right. Oh, there she is. Oh, she only used her powers, her bewitching powers for good. All right, what story do you have another one?
Wait. So now we're going to lead into. So I was going to talk about what everybody's fearful of is that the Supreme Court is setting it up so that you're going to have a situation where the individual swing states delegitimize their electoral votes so that they'll say, okay, we can't count here, we can't count there. And there's no coincidence that North Carolina, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Pennsylvania especially, because Pennsylvania becomes a very pivotal state. If Biden wins that, there's almost no chance for Trump to win electorally, given the fact that he's so far ahead in Wisconsin. So if this gets thrown into the House at some point, then the state legislatures vote. And as of right now, Gary can see if I'm correct. I forget the number. But as of now, 26 of the 50 state legislatures are controlled by Republicans. So you could have a situation where not only could Biden win the popular vote, he could win what people think is the electoral vote, but they could challenge it individually in some of these swing states and throw it into the House. And then that's kind of the nuclear option, so to speak. And then
in that instance, it comes down to each state having one vote, and it could be based on the 26 number you said. That could be a Republican
20, right?
win.
It'd be 26 to 22 or 26 to 24, whatever the math would be,
right.
Presumably.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the date that the electors vote is December 14th, I think. So that's how long. By what I've understood, by December 14th it will be over, but it could last that full 6 weeks.
Right, which is. Can you imagine the number of Reasonable Doubt breaking news shows we'll have?
Oh, my God.
It would be and can you imagine, this is my question, do I board up, because this is dropping on Saturday, do I board up the restaurants downtown or not? What's your opinion on that? We've been, both times we get hit, and even with the Dodgers, you get hit. But that's the difference between revelry and protest.
If Trump wins, there's going to be rioting. But if Biden wins, I don't think there's going to be rioting, is there?
I think more so, because I don't think it will be declared. I think if he wins and they're still questioning it, his supporters are going to freak out harder than if Trump wins.
I think Gary's right on that, because I think you're going to have both sides pissed off, because there's not going to be if there's no concession of
that's what I'm saying.
Right. So you're not. Yeah, it's not a clear. So he wins, but he doesn't get to be the president.
If
for
Trump
a while.
says congratulations on the 3rd or the 4th or the 5th, then we're fine, and I don't think there is big riots. Right. But if we get to November 4th and Trump hasn't said you win, but every news network says Biden wins, then the 4th. The cities will burn.
It's going to be interesting. Oh, you got to find that commercial. There's the greatest Biden commercial ever. I'm trying to think of the PAC that put it on, but it's a radio commercial, or maybe it's a TV commercial, but it's the mom going in to talk to the daughter, and it wakes the daughter up on election night, and the daughter wakes up and goes, Mom, who won? And the mom pauses and goes, Trump won. And then I don't want to screw it up, but she said he's going 12 more years or something like that. Like it's in the future. And they're like, oh, Mom. And you can hear people chanting 12 more years in the back. It's the greatest piece of political theater ever.
I want to see it. I want to see it.
I just heard it. I haven't seen it. It is so... This is why I could never work anywhere but here. If I was in that room and they were going, here's what we're going to do, I'd go, oh, goddamn, Jesus Christ. Can you just fucking do one about being pro-fracking or something? Like something. The weird heartstring stuff is so, it's so bizarre. It's like we have one party that's literally running on lower taxes, lower regulation, and being energy independent, and the other one is running on good vibes, puppies, and hugs. Like that's literally what the two parties. They're not even talking about immigration or anything. It's just one's just we're going to make money, and the other's like we're going to hug it out. That's all they. That's all. That's what it's come to.
The thing that's so disturbing about all of it that when I. And this is one of the reasons I think they always say with family or friends you should never talk politics, because when you talk to people, and I won't name them, I won't call them out, but I've had these conversations, and recently with Armenians because of the crisis that's happening in Artsakh right now, with Azerbaijan basically committing war crimes by the day and the timing being they're the proxy for Erdogan and the Turks. But I talk to all these Armenians and I'll say, guys, do you understand that one of the reasons that I believe that Erdogan thinks he can do this, just like he thought he could do it in Syria with the Kurds and everything else, is that he knows that Trump's in an election, number one. Number two, we know that he's got the Istanbul Trump Tower, and he's making money. We know that he kind of admires that Erdogan strongman. And he could solve this in a minute by just telling Erdogan, stop it. I mean, and he's got enough leverage, but he won't do it. And those same people, that's fucked up. It's an existential threat for Artsakh and Armenia. And then I'll say, and who are you voting for? And they'll go, Trump.
Really?
Yeah.
Is Trump an Armo guy?
Yeah. Well, Armos have what a lot of immigrants have, which is kind of, I used to say this about in La Cañada in Pasadena years ago, NIMBY. You remember NIMBY? Not in my backyard.
Right.
I got mine. You can't have yours. So Armos, there's been various waves of Armos that come over. First, it was from Beirut. Then it was from Iran. Then it was from the Soviet Union when it disintegrated. There tends to be this idea in immigrant communities. I'm here. I worked myself up. Stop bugging me with what you're doing.
Yeah.
And they kind of like, even though I escaped one autocrat, they kind of relate to the autocrat when they get here. So it's an interesting psychological dynamic. But yeah, Armos have a real thing for Trump. It never ceases to amaze me.
Well, if you find that spot, tell us, Gary. But
Gary. For those of you who can't see Gary right now, he is focused like a laser. Yeah, exactly. He's feverishly into it. Wait. So speaking of the election, and speaking of tugging at the heartstrings, I know that you must be into this and the Hunter Biden story, right? Mm-hmm. So I will tell you my reaction to it. Then I want you to tell me what you've heard so far. I have not gone into it deeply for two reasons. Number one, that it was Rudy Giuliani inspired. Now, for those of you who, whatever you may feel about Rudy Giuliani, I've always felt the same way about Rudy Giuliani. Since he was a U.S. attorney and he was perp walking guys, he invented the perp walk, in my humble opinion. And he's always been a piece of crap as far as I'm concerned. I think he's ruined in a lot of ways. He's responsible for a lot of prosecutorial nonsense and is a legacy of Rudy Giuliani. So what has happened to him, the caricature that has become him now is, and I'm talking, this is before Borat, and I don't know if he was tucking in his pants or not, although I did
seemed
laugh.
like he was,
It did.
It's comedy.
Yeah, but it is comedy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the fact remains, if Rudy is peddling it, I have a hard time with it. So I have a source criticism there. But I understand it's interesting because Steve Bannon is in the mix too. And have you ever interviewed Steve?
No.
Okay. For the caricature that people make of Steve, I've talked with Steve. He is incredibly bright. And for people who kind of parody him, this is an incredibly smart guy. Yes, he's under indictment right now. Yes, he's, there's many people who feel like he's the architect of the evil empire and everything else. But this is somebody who he's got a worldview that, for better or for worse, is thought through and is textured and everything else.
Well, we make everyone into caricatures, and we just do this little quick composite of them. But folks don't get where they are without having some sort of intellectual prowess or some ability. You don't just become you don't get to these places by being a doofus.
I remember 3 years ago having a discussion with him, and the reason I thought he was so bright, obviously, because when you find somebody who kind of tends to say things that resonate, he and I talked about Turkey, Iran, North Korea, and China, and we had a wide-ranging discussion about that. He recognized kind of the perils of Turkey, especially. He really did. And then he fell out of favor with Trump. I don't know if he's back in favor with Trump. You never know in Trump land or Trump world. But this is not a dumb guy, if you know what I mean.
I don't know what I know a lot of the official particulars of the story, and there's also a guy who's a former business partner of Hunter, who's basically was interviewed on Tucker Carlson the other night, just basically saying, I met with Joe 2 times. Here's what he was in for. Here's all the emails. Here's all the text I got. I traveled the world with Hunter.
Well, it'll be interesting because Tucker did a whole show on the missing UPS, although he didn't identify it at the time, with the documents.
Yeah.
And as I drove in here today, UPS said they found him.
Oh, well, that'll be.
So we'll see see what he's got.
He sat down with what's his name, Gary? God. Anyway, the business partner, and that guy was the most credible.
Starts
witness.
with a B.
Yeah, it's like I want to say
Tony Bobulinski.
Bobulinski. That guy was the most credible witness I've ever heard in my life. Everything was a date and a time and a stamp, and he's like former Navy officer and blah blah blah, and he just laid it out. So Biden. Here's what's basically going on. Biden is doing the same shit everyone else does, and he's just showing that's Russian disinformation. First off, no reporters touching it. None. They're completely on Biden's side. Nobody's asking any questions. They're saying this is Russian disinformation. And the Department of Justice or whoever it is, it goes, we don't have that information. No one is saying that. You can't just keep saying that. And they have the documents. They have the emails. They have the text. They have all the stuff.
Interesting. I've thought about this several times this week when you bring up Department of Justice. Bill Barr has kind of disappeared.
Yes, I've not seen him.
Bill Barr has just disappeared. Now, I know maybe he had COVID or maybe he was exposed at the super spreader event, and Chris Christie survived. But I tend to follow the legal news. I haven't seen much about Barr. I haven't seen much about your favorite prosecutor, the one that gives you nightmares.
Right, Durham. Right.
Nothing.
I don't know. It's all going to be too late for the election now. But
there's no surprise that can. I mean, as this drops on Saturday, you're not going to have any surprise. By the way, how many votes have already been cast? Isn't it something
60, 70 million?
Yeah,
I think it's north of 70 now.
Yeah, so that's almost
the long and the short of it are two things.
Yeah.
Biden's in with this guy making money, corruption. He's in like all politicians are in. He just says that's nuts. And the press doesn't press him, so he gets a pass. So that's basically, he's just saying, that's why he's going like, this is smear job. This is a Russian smear job. And they could go, well, the laptop's real. The documents are real. The texts are real.
You mean
your
partner's real. The
FBI. Press, or anyone who's doing their job could do it. Tucker Carlson's the only one who did it.
I think the problem is the same problem that I have. I have the immediate reaction. I see New York Post, and I say, where did New York Post get it? New York Post gets it from Rudy Giuliani. Where did Rudy Giuliani get it? His lawyer, Rudy's got a lawyer, who gets it from a Delaware laptop shop or computer shop. So that rings. If I'm cross-examining, I'm going full bore into that.
But then, if you're the Los Angeles Times or CNN, why don't you go interview that guy?
Well, that would be interesting.
Why don't you just keep saying Russian disinformation? Go look at the laptop.
So here's the argument.
Interview the guys.
Here's the argument. And I've heard Bannon make this argument. Bannon has made the argument, not in the time when I was talking to him one-on-one, but I've heard him publicly say it. He said that the only time any of these things get effective is when they get out of, he doesn't call it this, I call it this right-wing echo chamber. So Breitbart, Tucker Carlson, whatever other Daily Caller. Right. So to some degree, he's hoisted on his own petard, because when he says that, he then he puts up a wall that they can use as a pretext to not do the investigation. Make sense?
No. So I'll tell you exactly what's going on. The finish line is within sight.
How many hours? When this drops, we're 72?
Nobody, the entire media, save Fox and Breitbart and a couple are all pulling for Biden. There's this pesky story that came up, which there's plenty of meat on the bone, but they can see the finish line. The media is going to push him across the finish line, and Biden just says, "Oh, that's total. I'm not even going to answer that question. That's an insult. That's Russian disinformation." And then he'll cross the finish line. That's where they're at.
Well,
there's going to be no. By the way, Biden doesn't say that doesn't. He doesn't say like that's not Hunter's laptop.
I think they've taken the position, and it could be. There's so much of
but the entire media
happens,
has taken that position
because I think everybody has got post-traumatic 2016 syndrome. Everything about, I mean, if you take a look at the polls, there's no way Trump is going to win if you take a look at the polls. But people want to say, well, there's a chance because of 2016.
Right.
No, it's not the same. But
they don't want the same thing that happened to Hillary.
And very much to your point, Mark, even if you happen to be awake at 1 a.m. when this drops, the polls in the West close in 67 hours.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's just, so it's never going to happen. And there's so much of what goes or passes for journalism. Somebody said the other day, it's amazing that what passes for journalism now are ex-political operatives. So I turn on the TV. I turn on CNN. It's all former Obama people, right? I turn on Fox. It's former or it's either current Republicans.
George Stephanopoulos is the lead guy at ABC.
Who, by the way, when I first met him, guess where he was? He was Clinton's guy running the election.
Crazy.
He was literally sitting side by side with Carville.
All right, do we have that commercial? This is the pack behind this is the Lincoln Project.
Yep, here we go.
All right.
Hey, honey. Mommy. You asked me to wake you and tell you what happened in the election. Who won? Trump. Trump won. But I thought you could only be president 2 times. Not anymore.
But on a happy note, you're not going to get raped in taxes. So that's good. You're not going to pay 62% if you move to fucking California or New York City.
Oh, God, California. They're not going to follow you around for 10 years. Not even a deadbeat dad gets followed around for 10 years.
I only heard it on the radio, so I thought that was your daughter. But I guess it was the young son. Anyway, so they're doing 12 more years. So that's in the future. And Trump's he's going for a third. He just won his third, and they're chanting 12 more years.
Well, I hate to have anybody's head explode, and you'll, as Gary says, within 60 hours of this thing dropping, the chances of Trump winning, if the votes are counted, are slim and none, and Slim has exited the building. I mean, the idea that the Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and the fact that he's in play in Georgia. There's no way for Trump to win if he wins Georgia.
Well,
if Biden wins Georgia.
We'll bring it up on the next episode. When we do our next episode of Reasonable Doubt, we will have a president, or theoretically.
Theoretically, right? Or we'll have a food fight of monumental proportions. What's your prediction? I mean, as long as I'm going out on a limb here.
I listen to the polls.
Yeah.
But I do have this theory, which is the polls, wherever they have Biden, that's where he's at. Wherever Trump is, may not necessarily be represented. So I feel like it's like a ceiling. So if Trump is at 53% in Wisconsin, then if Biden's at 53% in Wisconsin, then Biden's at 53% in Wisconsin. If Trump's at 47, I don't know if there's room above his head.
Right.
I don't think people poll accurately now because people are scared. People have just sort of figured out that don't talk about Trump, don't say anything about Trump. And so I don't know if it's the Bradley effect. Tom Bradley.
It is. I
don't know if you can get accurate polling with Trump. You can get accurate polling with Mitt Romney, but I don't know that you can get accurate polling with Trump. And however inaccurate it is, it's definitely going to be more people voting than said they were going to vote for him. So will, if it goes one direction. So we know where Biden is. And Trump's well beneath Biden, but he has room above his head to float up, but we don't know how much.
And I think it is the Bradley effect. For those who haven't listened to us before, famously, Tom Bradley went into the gubernatorial election, I forget if it was 3 or 4 points ahead of George Duke Majan, and the Duke won. And by the way, Duke, when he ran for Attorney General the first time, Armenian icon, finished 4 out of 4 because he ran against Evel Younger and two other white guys. When he ran against Yvonne Brathwaite Burke, ethnicity black female, he won the Attorney General spot. When he ran for governor, he ran against Bradley and he won. So, Armo versus
somebody wrote a term paper on Duke Majan back in 1971.
Trust me, Duke Majan was the original Law and Order Armo. He, to his everlasting credit, he took the Armenian community from being progressive Democrats as a whole, because you just kind of escape the desert and the genocide and you tend to identify with the underdog. And he literally turned them into Law and Order Republicans in one generation. It was amazing.
All right. I'm going to be doing live shows with Mark, by the way, November 20th and 21st, West Palm Beach Improv.
Wait until you see where we're staying there, too.
Oh, I cannot wait. The 21st, that's going to be the live Reasonable Doubt with Mark. That'll be a matinee show, and then early ACS shows, late stand-up shows. You can go to adamcarolla.com and check out our YouTube page and go to Chassis and check out all our movies, 2 S's and a Y. What do you got, Mark?
I've got... there's several interesting things. I normally reserve this for plugging my stuff, but as anybody knows, there's an existential threat in ARTSOC, so I would say go to Armenia Fund, contribute if you can, or go on to social media, hold these people accountable. It's live or die, and we are a gutty little Christian nation sitting there in a democracy in a field of kind of Islamist terrorists. So. For those of you who don't know about it, follow me on Twitter, and I'll try to give you a little more information.
So, till next time, Adam Carolla for Mark Garriga saying Mahala.
Thanks for listening to Reasonable Doubt. Tune in next Saturday for an all-new episode.